And welcome to name documentation. Some of the things you might want to have handy before we get started. Source documentation, whether it be on-site websites or books that you may have handy. Note taking. If you're using a laptop, Notepad works great for something like this. Current forms, all located at the Blue Tiger submissions forms section. You'll know that they're the correct ones when you download them in your particular preference. On the lower right hand corner they will say for Laurel version 3.0, East version 1.0, Laurel approved on 28 June 2016. Look for this because if you got an outdated form, the college will automatically bounce this back, and it generates a lot of time for your clients to get this all. Now, let's go ahead and begin. Console table, you're going to look at various different clients. Granted, not usually two are ever going to be completely the same. We'll also make a disclaimer that in this particular case, all SCA names are from actual people who have given me the consent to go ahead and use. All situations are made up and have no reflection on the general in question. Okay, usually it breaks down to various forms. In this particular one, this client does have a rough idea of what they're looking for, but nothing generally settled. Can say that these are usually very easy and happy, or they can be the most difficult ones that you have, just narrowing down from all the viable sources to the client's wishes. In this particular case, the client's looking for a later period Irish origin name. Go straight to the Academy of St. Gabriel's Medieval Name Archive. Once at the archive, scroll down on the left hand down till you see personal names in specific cultures. Scroll down a little bit further on the left hand side, you're going to see Irish and Manx names. Click on that hyperlink. It's going to bring you over to this. Client's looking for a later period name, so I'm usually concentrating down to the lower of the page. If they're not particularly sure exactly what they're looking for as far as a name is concerned, start with the surnames. It's always usually the harder one to document, and you can go backwards to the given name, which in this particular case we're going to go ahead and do so with the masculine descriptive by. Click on that, and it brings you to several pages that they can browse through. I usually turn the laptop around or hand them the tablet. Say, scroll to your heart's content, find me something that jumps out of the page for you. In this particular case, we do have one that is pleasing to the customer, so we're going to go ahead and get this drafted. So pull out your notepad, and it's time to make some. Now, let's go ahead and begin. Console table, you're going to look at various different clients. Granted, not usually two are ever going to be completely the same. We'll also make a disclaimer that in this particular case, all SCA names are from actual people who have given me the consent to go ahead and use. All situations are made up and have no reflection on the general in question. Goes down to show examples of good documentation, what the College of Heralds likes actually seeing, what's noticeably gonna step up and show what they're looking for when actually submitting a name. In this particular case, each part she lists good documentation in the summaries to include title of the page and by whom, hyperlink for the references, dates shown with the name, any CINA attested pattern sorted. Click on that hyperlink. It's going to bring you over to this. Client's looking for a later period name, so I'm usually concentrating down to the lower of the page. If they're not particularly sure exactly what they're looking for as far as a name is concerned, start with the surnames. It's always usually the harder one to document. And okay, now that we have the surname, let's direct to the following: culturally mixed names. Now, if the client is looking for split like Irish Gaelic and English, or something along that same lines, English French is also one I've run into quite often. Gotta go to Appendix C over on the CINA, where it's going to talk about the name mixes name phrases found in a single region of that Appendix C. You have 500 years to play around with. However, if it's two regional naming groups, narrows down to 300. Basically keeps all the no massive jumps across the timeline from when a given name and a surname could have been an example of. Again, these are all found at the Standards for Evaluation of Names and Armory under Appendix C, number 2, Culturally Mixed Names. Okay, we got the surname. Jump back a couple of spots on the web page and have the client go again and see if there's something that he or she likes for a first name. In this case, we've got one. Pull it up in full face value. Grab a look also at the dates. Make sure you're checking your notes for the surname documentation you just had. Make sure it still falls within those guidelines, and go ahead and do the same thing all over again. Write up the summary on the given name for your client. Okay, now you got the given name. Let's grab our forms. Go straight to the blue tiger, scroll down to Eastern Submissions Forms, grab one of your particular preference. I'm a Windows user, so I'm going for Word doc right off the bat. Individual name form is what we're downloading. Okay, now one more time. Disclaimer that all personal information has been altered to protect the actual gentle. So in this case, we put in for society name on the top, and then legal name, address, branch name, but the local group that they actually associate along with, phone number, gender of the submitter, also, of course, consulting client's email address, consulting email herald's name and email and phone number. I usually do one due to space requirements because it tends to fill up the more in-depth. And if you look over on the right-hand side, it's going to say name type. Is this a primary name? Are they looking for an alternative name to go along with their primary name? This is a household, and households are always linked to one particular person right off the bat, or other, and they give you space underneath. In this case, black market for primary, and action type. Is this a brand new name? Is this a resubmission? If it's a resubmission, they're also going to ask you where it bounced originally, Kingdom or Laurel. If it's change from a previous name, are they retaining it as an alternate or releasing the old name? Change of a holding name. Not too many holding names happen up on much, so the last three down here, you're not going to use. And here in the middle, we actually have a series of questions that usually make most heralds twitch when they get to it. I've heard this section being called the box of death. There are various other explanations for this. In this particular case, I narrowed down to one simple question. Do you not allow the College of Heralds to actually make a change if they need to, as long as they make contact with you during your submissions process, to keep your name moving forward? If you do so, then we'll break it down to, do you allow major and minor changes? You can see on the form, major and minor major changes include adding or dropping a name element, Changing an element's language, change the order of elements. Minor changes will include accents, punctuation, hyphenation, addition, deletion of a letter, upper and lowercase. If they say no, check them both off, and at that point, if it bounces for or hiccups for any reason, they will send it back. If if the name does end up having to be changed, you care much of. In this particular case, the client wants language and or culture, and right below it should have included in the screen capture. But if this particular case, you'd put down here what is actually important, whether it's the late period Irish or the particular time frame, if it's the culture, what culture is it, and again, my specific gender. I'm going to see this is probably going to phase out eventually by the way things have been going. Then while it's still in the form, we're going to still use it. Down the bottom, those notes that I had you take on previous about the given insert names, well, this is where you plug them in. Always go given and then serve, so it just reads one right after the other, exactly as you put them under the notepad. Down at the bottom, again, I completely forgot this when I was setting up the screens, you'd also be including the name attested pattern for given plus descriptive by name as found in the same article, and give the hyperlink on it, or it could be Appendix A of the CINA. Just really depends on where you found it. Again, if you've got questions, go straight to the SCA Heraldry page. They're more than happy. And now we get to the submission point. Usually once a year, I keep going back to this site. I actually created a small little form that I give out to my clients. Basically is a summary of what you see over on here, starting off with the form documentations. This is a name, so you're only going to get one copy of the forms. The website documents actually print out the pages, even though they're from the Academy of St. Gabriel's. Just speeds up the process. Some locations are considered what we consider no photocopy sources. I'll get to that in a later tutorial. Once you print it out how many forms you need to be printed, then we get ready to instruct the client on where they should act. And then legal name, address, branch name, but the local group that they actually associate along with, phone number, gender of the submitter, also, of course, consulting client's email address, consulting email herald's name and email and phone number. I usually do one due to space requirements because it tends to fill up the more in depth you go into on that. And you've done it. That is the first submission, all wrapped up and ready to go. Thank you for putting up with the little rough edges that we've got currently going on. Stay tuned for the next one. I'm going to make these a little more frequent, and we'll get a little more complex as things go.